talking about a franchise as massive as Mass Effect, it's like talking about Star Wars because the entire universe is the size of a universe. There's so much to talk about when the topic of Mass Effect is brought up. There's the games, then there's the spin-offs, comics, novels, and there's an animated film and a live-action one in the works. You can talk about the Mass Effect mythos for days because there's just so much to all of it, and it's pretty much all canon. The only things not canon are the one fan novel and 2 fan films. While the Star Wars universe is much larger than Mass Effect's, it took over 30 years and closing in on 40 to get that big. Mass Effect is only 6 years old, and the fact that its expanded universe has come as far as it has, that's impressive. I won't be talking about the novels, the comics, the spin-off games, or the animated movie, because there just isn't enough time for all that, and I want to focus on the main 3 games. And I don't review movies, comics, or books. And I really don't plan on it either. Because I'm reviewing all 3 games at once, and due to how the nature of the games connect from one to another, and the fact that they're all RPGs, so they're all very long adventures, I'm not going to be able to show all 3 of them at once, and I'll have to condense everything so this review isn't 6 hours long. But fortunately, this is my second playthrough where I'm making different choices. But I'll get into that in more detail later. The Mass Effect games were developed by BioWare, a company that is very well known for its deep and involving RPGs. Baldur's Gate and Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic being games that were huge hits for BioWare. They licensed Epic Games' Unreal 3 engine to make all 3 games, which I found strange, because usually they just make their own. And from all the games they've made, only the Mass Effect games and Star Wars The Old Republic use game engines from other companies. I'm not going to count the Frostbite engine used for Dragon Age Inquisition because that was made by DICE and BioWare are both owned by EA, so I kind of see that as an all-in-the-family type of thing. BioWare wanted Mass Effect to be an epic space opera, like Star Wars, but unlike Star Wars, there is no fantasy elements like the Force. Everything is answered through science and technology. There is the overlying mystery of the Protheans, a race of aliens that disappeared and are believed to have created many things in the Mass Effect universe, but I'll get into story elements later. My personal history with Mass Effect was one of little interest until I actually sat down and played it. I had bought the first 2 on Steam during one of their Christmas holiday specials in 2010 where both games were on sale for about $2 each, and after trying the demo for Mass Effect 2, and saw that it ran very well on my old computer, but I just never installed them. I later bought Mass Effect 1, 2, and 3 on the 360, and in 2013, I managed to find a copy of the collector's edition of Mass Effect 3 on the day after release, all because EA refused to release a 3rd game on Steam. I then traded in all 3 games when I was done with them. And now I own all 3 yet again. Yeah, I am one of those idiots that will trade in and rebuy the same game several times over. The game also has a lot of controversy. Mass Effect 3 was the target of a controversy because of the Sandy Hook Elementary shootings that took place because the perpetrator's brother liked the game on Facebook. Granted, the confusion came from the perpetrator having his brother's ID on him, but it didn't stop the media from blaming video games for violent actions. And it was later revealed that the perpetrator had mostly played non-violent games, with Dance Dance Revolution and Super Mario Bros. Being his favorites. The game series came under fire by conservative media groups in 2008, saying that the first game showed full frontal nudity and graphic sodomy. They furthered their claims, but also admitted that they never played the game. Fans of the game and EA refuted those claims, and the people who made those claims apologized. Because if they actually played the game, the only same-sex relationship would be with a female Shepard and a female Asari scientist. Unfortunately, that's not the end of it because it got really dumb when the 3rd installment came around. In Mass Effect 2, once again, the only same-sex relationships were with the female Shepard. Male Shepard could only romance female characters. It wasn't until Mass Effect 3 where male Shepard could enter into a same-sex relationship, and then people lost their minds. It was a huge controversy, but it died down pretty quickly. I could understand that if you chose the wrong options and got locked into a relationship when you were pursuing a female character, you'd be mad, because then that Shepard wasn't the one you planned on building. But in Mass Effect 3, there was only 2 male characters out of the possible 10 characters to romance. So there's 8 females to be in a relationship with. But for female Shepard, there's 5 females and 5 males for her to romance with, and no one complained about her same-sex relationships. So it's okay for female Shepard to be in a same-sex relationship, but not for male Shepard? I forget which Dragon Age game it was, but it didn't even come close in controversy. It's just a ridiculous double standard, and people poop their pampers for a silly reason. Then there's the ending controversy, which I can understand the anger, but I think it was just blown way out of proportion. mainly because I kinda saw it coming. There were 3 endings at the time of release, and they were pretty much all the same. The Reapers are stopped and the galaxy is saved. And fans went nuts because of it, and I can understand. Throughout all 3 games, you made choice after choice after choice, and at the end you have to pick your ending scenario. And your choices up until that point ultimately did not matter because they did not impact the ending. People raised a campaign and charity to make BioWare produce a better ending. They sent vanilla cupcakes to BioWare in a way to show how displeased they were with the endings. One person filed a complaint with the Federal Trade Commission citing false advertising, and that BioWare did not deliver on their promises they made during development. The Better Business Bureau sided with fans of the series that BioWare did not deliver on their promise over the complete control of the endings they would have. An employee of BioWare and one of the writers of the game said that the executive producer and lead writer came up with the endings that they liked and didn't allow for any peer review like they did with the other parts of the game, effectively locking out the other writers in the process. See what I mean? I haven't even gotten a graphics, sound, or gameplay yet. There's just so much to talk about. The graphics are good for the time each game was released. The first game's textures don't look that good compared to the later series when the camera is zoomed in, resulting in the textures looking pixelated. The art style is realistic in a sci-fi sense, but cliché. There's the clean, futuristic-looking cities or science lab with technology way ahead of ours, and then there's the dirty, grungy, undeveloped planets and stuff of that nature that we're all used to seeing in sci-fi movies. I'm not gonna blame them for not doing something different because, let's face it, that's how we expect the future to look and be like. The music reminds me of the music score from Tron Legacy, where it's that otherworldly, futuristic techno music. I really like it, and it adds a lot of futuristic tone to the atmosphere as well. The voice acting is pretty good. In fact, the voice actress who did Tali was phenomenal. The way she conveyed Tali's emotions just felt real and not acted. In fact, that's one of the reasons why I put a lot of effort into making sure I could romance Tali, because she felt like a real person. Sadly, your only romance option in Mass Effect 1 is Ashley, and I didn't like her. I just kept her around for her combat experience. All 3 games are a third-person shooter, but with heavy RPG elements thrown into the game. You get equipment that helps your stats, there's upgrades to improve your offenses and defenses, and this changes for the better as the series goes on into a more traditional RPG sense where instead of changing your entire suit, only parts of it are changed. Same goes for your weapons in a sense. Instead of having infinite ammo, the gun will overheat and need to cool, preventing you from using it. But then the series progresses to a more traditional sense where the weapons need to be reloaded. People will debate that each game feels different from the last, or that it's just more of the same as the series progressed. To me, I'm going to take the middle ground here and go with the same but different argument. What I mean by this is that you can see that Mass Effect 2 is built off the groundwork that the first game did, and that Mass Effect 3 is built upon 2's framework. In other words, I see that the gameplay itself evolved over time. It kept itself relatively the same, but improved and made things better. But then there's the RPG elements to the game. Get some popcorn, this could be a while. Like all RPGs, you level your character as you progress. The leveling system changes across all 3 games. For example, the first game has a series of bars that you put talents into, and the third is more of a talent tree system. So you can build your Shepard to your liking. I mostly use assault rifles and shotguns, and you get different gear to buff up your character. But that's all fairly standard for RPGs, and if you've played RPGs before, you should be used to those elements. But then there's the big part, choice. Your actions in the game will have consequences later on, and if you port your Shepard over to the next game, those actions you made in the previous will affect certain outcomes of the game, and porting your Shepard to the final game will affect that one too. So an action you made in the first will be reflected in the third. So throughout your adventure across all 3 games, you may have to take some time to decide your choices. Are you sure you want to go with that choice? Are you really sure? Well, guess what? You just killed everyone. Good job. This mechanic of choice really changes how you play the game, so you'll realize that at some point, you're going to be experiencing a different game than someone else who's playing it because it's unlikely that they're going to make the same choices that you do. In my first playthrough, I made choices that looked like they may have the most reward, but in this second one, I'm making more Paragon choices. And I have noticed that different dialogue options have been available to me and that NPC characters have reacted differently to my responses. A friend of mine had said that choice is what the 7th generation of gaming was all about. To add that effect of making a difference in the game world and having a different experience than someone else would have. The 7th generation did have quite a few games where choice did impact the game, like BioShock 1 and 2 for example, especially 2. Choice in an RPG makes the game world feel real. like playing Dungeons and Dragons. While the Dungeon Master narrates the campaign and the players make a choice to do something, the Dungeon Master can make that choice have a reward or a consequence. And these choices affect the story, and well, I'm not gonna go into every single little detail. I will give you the basic gist of the story because that's pretty much what stays the same. Remember, this month is a theme month of games that have great stories, and if you want to avoid spoilers, go to this part in the review. In Mass Effect, you play as Commander Shepard, a human in the military who shows a lot of promise, and is the first human to become a Spectre, which is an elite intergalactic police force. You're tasked with bringing down a rogue Spectre, who has found a massive and extremely advanced warship, but the warship is actually a machine called a Reaper, which is a race of machines that commit genocide on the galaxy every 50,000 years. The game ends with the looming threat of them as their cycle starts to begin anew. The next game starts off with Shepard being killed or seemingly killed in the vacuum of space, but is resurrected. He jokes about that he was only mostly dead. He allies himself with Cerberus and is fighting off the Collectors, a race of aliens who worked for the Reapers to build ones based on human DNA, and the game ends with the Reapers coming to the galaxy. The third game picks up here as humans and aliens are scrambling to find a way to combat the Reapers, and at the end of the game, at time of release, there were 3 endings to choose from. And this is where everyone went nuts, and I think it's a little silly, and I'll explain that afterwards. Destroy the Reapers and all synthetic life, and if you had a certain stat maxed out, a seemingly dead Shepard would be shown inhaling deeply, proving that he lived. You could control the Reapers, stopping them from attacking and making them useful to the galaxy. Or 3. Synthesize all life in the galaxy, making it a combination of organic and synthetic. Other than that, all 3 endings are pretty much the same, and after fan reaction, a 4th option was released. You could refuse and the Reapers would destroy everything, and 50,000 years later, when they come again, a way is found to stop them. I find it silly to get mad over this. Yeah, it was marketed that your choices would affect the outcome, but what about your journey to the end? All the choices you made did have an effect on your journey. The series is like a road. You can take the highway, back roads, or side roads, you could go off the beaten path or whatever, but your destination will still be the same. Unless you drive around aimlessly and waste gas, but that's your own fault. Think of it as Harold and Kumar go to White Castle. They wanted to go to White Castle, but because of the choices they made, look at the incredible journey they took. But they still ended up at White Castle, a relatively mundane thing. But look at the journey. That's what matters. You were on an adventure that was unique to you and no one else. It's an experience that no one can take away from you. In the end, the destination doesn't matter at all, because of that incredible journey you took, which you shouldn't be taking for granted because you felt the ending wasn't what you thought it would be. But I can still see why someone would get mad at it. The endings didn't take in account for what you did, which I can see as a huge disappointment. But you should still remember that your choices did affect your journey. Think of all the lore that you learned, how the Reapers built the Citadel in mass relays, and that the Reapers were created to prevent organic life from being destroyed by synthetic life they create, and that when the Reapers come and destroy everything, organic life is preserved in the form of a Reaper. This cycle allows other primitive organic species to evolve in a way to try and find a balance between organic and synthetic life. It's kind of like the Matrix, just more complicated, and giant telepathic squids are involved. Like I said, this can go on for days, but I just don't have that kind of time. I have the Stanley Parable to get to next. But the story is really good. It's Star Wars the original Trilogy good. The characters and their backstories are written perfectly. My favorite character is Tali. There were times where I was saying to myself, screw Shepard, I want to play as her. I love her geekiness and dialogue, which is some of the best in the game series. The sections that focus on her and her story are great. In fact, she is the one that I romance, and I'll tell you why. The romance sections for her are written so well, they really make you feel for the character. Because of her species' weak immune system, it makes that romance so much more meaningful, knowing that taking off her suit for physical contact with Shepard could mean that she could die from illness. That makes the romance so much more meaningful, so much so that you can feel it. That's how powerful the writing is. And that's just one example of this fantastic writing. But I didn't choose this series to review for its writing. I chose it because of its revolutionary way of storytelling, which is a method that needs to be done more often. You want to immerse players into a game, give them the ability of choice, and have those choices be reflected in the story and NPC interactions. You want to know how immersed I got into this game world? The only thing that snapped me back to reality is when the game paused because the batteries in my controller ran out of power. Your mind's eye is a very powerful thing. If the game can take you out of reality and put you into the game world with characters that are so real and a world that reflects your choice, that's revolutionary. And the story also blends in several types of themes, like prejudice, humans not liking aliens or aliens not liking humans, and the dangers of technology and how things like artificial intelligence can become self-aware and try to destroy everything. It's a space opera, that's what it is, and if you haven't played them yet, why are you watching this? Shut this off and go play them right now. I admit that doing a single review encompassing all 3 games was a mistake on my part, as I can't do such a good series justice like this. However, even if I did do each game individually, each video would be probably way too long, longer than this one, as I would have to explain every single detail of my experience. And that's just what these games are. They're an experience. Sure, there's some weird bugs, but you can easily look past them because they're not game-breaking, and some are just hilarious. While it's too early to call, I think that the Mass Effect series are going to be those games that are just going to become timeless. Games that 20 years from now will be dusting off our 360s, PS3s, or loading up our PCs, and starting to play these games just to experience Commander Shepard's journey, and maybe you'll make different choices to experience different paths that you'll take to the end of your adventure. BioWare has stated that they're getting ready to develop a new Mass Effect game. What they'll do? I don't know, but I hope it's going to live up to this trilogy. These games are a must-play. No, that's not good enough. That's not a good way to describe this. These games are a must experience. It is imperative that you experience these masterpieces as soon as you can.